Ladies and gentlemen, please give a huge Hoosier welcome to a true patriot's voice, Senator Rick Santorum.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Richard, you can introduce me anytime. That was very, very kind, and thank you for your very kind comments and for your very warm and gracious welcome here. I suspect that's rain pounding away. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk until the rain stops. How's that? I don't get a chance to speak in front of 2,000 people very often, so I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity. Did you notice how it started to rain harder when I said that? So I think someone's trying to encourage me here. That's the way I take that. Thank you for being here. On so many levels, thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting Southwestern Indiana Right to Life. That, of course, goes with, boy, he's really encouraging me now. Thank you for supporting Right to Life. Thank you for standing up for what you believe in and coming here. And thank you for encouraging each other by being here. And thank you for encouraging all of the people in the Right to Life movement by being here. And particularly, thank you for encouraging me. When I look out across this huge venue and see all of these lovers of life, I am very much encouraged about the future of our country, because I absolutely believe that if America is not a country that stands up and defends the dignity of every human life, if we do not stand shoulder to shoulder with God's children, then how can we as a country get down on our knees and ask for His blessing and expect it to be delivered? You are doing the Lord's work for our country by fighting for that right that our founders put first for a reason in the Declaration of Independence. They could have written liberty, life, and the pursuit of happiness, or happiness, life, and liberty, but they didn't, because it wouldn't have made sense. The foundational right upon which the others build is life. No other right matters if you're not here to exercise it. And so what you are here tonight robustly communicating is that you are not going to go away. I spoke at the Right to Life March in Washington, D.C. in January. 750,000 people. You didn't read that in any of the newspapers or see that in any of the reports in the media. 750,000 people. After 40 years of Roe versus Wade, they were writing the epitaph of the pro-life movement. It's going to go away. It did not. Why? Because truth never goes away. You stand for truth. You stand for the real truth that at the moment of conception, that thing in the womb is not a blob of tissue, as the abortion industry has tried to lie to us. It is a human life. You should feel good that every force that can be waged against us, the educational establishment, the media, the popular culture, Every avenue of power, the Supreme Court, the federal government, state governments, have been waging a battle to hide the truth and force upon the American public this great lie of abortion. And yet here we are, 40 years later. Time magazine, you may have seen the cover, lamented just a few months ago, the 40th anniversary of Roe versus Wade. Why haven't we won? And the reason I start with this speech is because I want you to feel encouraged by what's happening. Because you know what? There's a lot to be discouraged about in America today. There's a lot to be discouraged about in the pro-life movement. The fact that it's been 40 years and here we are. We haven't made the progress we wanted. But we have withstood an onslaught that no other movement has been able to withstand. You should feel good about the state of play in America. Do you know, if you look and survey young people today, they are the most pro-life of generations. They are the most pro-life of generations. There was a sea change over the past 10, 15 years on the issue of abortion, driven by the pro-life movement, by organizations like Right to Life here in Indiana. And now, as you heard from Mary Ellen, we're beginning to go on the offensive. Doesn't it feel good to start to go on the offensive? When I came into Congress back in 1990, as Richard talked about, we were not on the offensive. I ran, as Richard said, as a pro-lifer. But I had committed never to talk about it. You just didn't talk about it because there was a heavy price to pay. I was from a Democratic district. I defeated an incumbent. They were putting another incumbent up against me in 2 years thanks to redistricting. Then I ran for the Senate, same thing. I was up against a Democratic incumbent in a state of Pennsylvania, hardly a a red state. And so I was pro-life, but I never said a word in the 4 years of the House of Representatives on the issue of abortion. Came to the Senate and pledged to myself I would never, ever, I'd work behind the scenes, but I wouldn't do that. It's just political suicide. And as Richard mentioned, this issue of partial birth abortion. Remember hearing it first described, I couldn't believe it was true. I don't know why I couldn't believe it was true. After listening to the testimony and reading the testimony from what was going on in Philadelphia, in the trial of, I hate to use the term, Dr. Gosnell, shouldn't have surprised me that things like that were going on in the abortion mills in this country, but it did. It shocked me. And I finally realized that all I was doing was perpetuating the dirty little secret because I wasn't willing to make the sacrifice. So I did something I never thought I would do. I actually went out and spoke on the issue of abortion. 6 months later, I was managing the bill overriding the president's veto. President Clinton vetoed that bill to ban partial birth abortion, and I ended up September of 1996 trying to override that bill. I guess the rest is history. I needed a lot of encouragement because I knew we weren't going to win. I knew it was going to hurt me politically, but yet I just felt compelled to do it, felt moved to do it. I prayed a lot about it. I felt this is what God was calling me to do, even though I can tell you I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to take that risk. I didn't want to put my career on the line for a bill I was going to lose anyway. But I went out there and did. And God blessed me. I'll never forget one of the first debates I had, and I was describing what was going on with this partial birth abortion procedure. There was a chart that showed the procedure. One of the senators earlier in the day had likened the procedure to an appendectomy. There was a bloody medical procedure, and if you described any medical procedure, it would be gruesome. Another senator got up and talked about how women who were standing outside of the room, the Senate chamber, lobbying senators as they came in to vote against the bill. These were women who had had partial birth abortions, and she said they were crying. So Senator Boxer from California said they were crying because I wanted to take away an option. And I didn't understand. And so I got up and I said, the senator from California said that these women were crying. I said, we would be deafened by the cries of the babies who are not here to cry because of this procedure. And then I pointed to that diagram and I said, another senator likened this procedure to an appendectomy. I said, this is not an appendix, pointing to the baby. I said, it's a baby. It's a baby. At that very moment, the cry of a baby could be heard in the United States Senate chamber. A cry could be heard of a baby. Now, why that's miraculous is that babies aren't allowed in the United States Senate chamber. You have to be 7 years of age to be in the gallery of the United States Senate. I served in the Senate for 12 years and I never heard another baby cry. But at that very moment, I believe God sent a message to the United States Senate through this imperfect, very frightened vessel standing on the Senate floor. I say that to you again to encourage you. You heard example after example. I hope you understand how brilliant this program was tonight prior to this speech. The people that came up, one after another, exhibited to you the artist, the writer, the businessman, the soldier. Ordinary, average people doing their job, pursuing their passion, but doing it in a way that gave glory to Him and standing up for truth. People ask me all the time, what can I do, Senator? Every day. Every day. You can commit yourself in everything you do to make a difference for life. You heard Caitlin talk about 3,000, almost 4,000 abortions a day. One of my favorite sayings is, every day we get up and we tell ourselves lies so we can live. And we have convinced ourselves here, even in the pro-life movement, even of those who are passionate and active, even me, that we can't make a difference. And that's a lie. This country's changing, ladies and gentlemen. We know it. We see it. We've seen it dramatically so in the last few weeks. It's unsettling, isn't it? Saw it from the last election. You almost scratched your head and say, how could that have happened? What's going on in this country? We have a president who says he wants to transform America. And he's winning. He's got lots of friends in powerful places, All of those institutions I talked about earlier, and the media who lies for things that they care about, who hides truth if it hurts their cause, who supports lies if it helps their cause. You see it. Obamacare. The audacity of the President of the United States yesterday to talk about people in the gun lobby lying about what the bill was about. Read your Obamacare bill, Mr. President, and stop lying about it. Every day, we get the spin, the propaganda. And they support it. The media just pumps it out there and then hides the Kermit Gosnells of the world, hoping to protect their sacred cows. Destroys good, decent people running for political office for a slight misstatement, and then shills for a vice president who malaprops every day. Hollywood. I can just stop there. Higher education. The indoctrination machine. You know why America has begun to change? It's because they took over the halls of higher education. Yes, even in Indiana. Yes, even in Big Ten schools like I went to. And even in Catholic schools. Even in the state of Indiana. The elite, the liberal elite have taken. And they are twisting the minds with moral relativism. Violating the first commandment of putting that false god before them. Of whatever that passion that they have, instead of truth. Only 30% of Americans go to college. Yet, they are the ones who are rising to those elite postures in business. Do you know how unusual it is for someone in the business community to stand up and fight for the truth, for religious liberty, or for American values? The business community across this country, large businesses particularly, are quick to conform, because if they don't, what happens to them is what happens to Hobby Lobby. They get beat up, they get ostracized, they get boycotted, and so they conform. Education, business, Hollywood, the media. What's left? You. You're left. Your family, your church, your local nonprofits. You're left to fight the battle. Caitlin said at the end of her talk, "What will you do?" You see, it used to be in America that we could rely upon all of those institutions to help you, to help America, to shape the future of our country, to mold us, to help families raise their children with the values that made our country great, to stand up for the dignity of human life. But now, you are awash in a sea of deceit, of trash, of sewage that comes through these and every other device that's plugged in or mobile. This is the world we live in. How did we get there? I have my theory. It's the same way we got to where we did back in 1776. We were facing the most powerful array of forces in the history of the world, the British military. The most powerful army and navy the world had ever seen. The vast majority of the business people in America were loyalists. The big business paying their tribute to those who would take care of them, not unlike today. How did we win that battle? If you'd have gone early in 1776 and gone to the state of Pennsylvania or Massachusetts or Georgia and asked a Georgian, a Pennsylvanian, a New Englander, what were you fighting for? You probably would have gotten 3 different answers, maybe 4. But then a group of people gathered together in Philadelphia, and they etched out this thing called the Declaration of Independence. And this declaration laid out for America its soul. 4 times God is mentioned in the Declaration of Independence. At the heart of it is that phrase we all know: we hold these truths to be self-evident. For those of us who say, these old guys who wrote this stuff, they didn't know what they were talking about. They were talking about self-evident truth, available to everybody. That all men were created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. People ask me, what are we trying to get back to? What's your vision for the future? That. It really comes to that. It's who we are. We're a country that is based on God-given rights. God-given rights. Rights don't come from the government. They don't come from the president or from the Supreme Court. They come from God. That's what makes America, America. Because we are not an ethnicity, a race, or a creed, except that creed. That's our creed. That's our soul, who we are. And it rallied America. And we built the greatest country in the history of the world. We transformed humankind. And now, and how did we do it? Because we had a group of people who were willing to go out, ordinary people. I wrote a book called American Patriots. And the reason I felt like I had to write it after coming off the campaign trail is because I realized that the greatness of America didn't lie in George Washington. Yes, he was important. But that we looked at the odds, average, ordinary Americans looked at the odds, looked at the businesses and the loyalists and the redcoats and the Navy and the king, and said, we're going to fight anyway, against the odds, because we want it more. We're willing to pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And they did it every day. How did we beat the most well-equipped, best generaled fighting force in the world because we wanted it more. We're willing to make more sacrifices than they do. Ladies and gentlemen, America is being transformed today because a small cadre of people, one of whom is the President of the United States, wants to transform America into something fundamentally different than what America has been. And the reason they are winning is because every single day they fight. They take nothing for granted. They take no prisoners. If you are out of their orthodoxy, they condemn you. They go after you. They try to destroy you because they believe what they are doing is right. And they're willing to risk it all. If you've learned anything from human history, look at what can be done with a small group of committed people who want to make a difference. Every day we get up and we tell ourselves lies so we can live. That you can live with 4,000 children dying every day. And you've convinced yourself, there's just nothing I can do about it. I better go to work. Yeah, go to work and make a difference. Oh, I can't talk about this with my friends. It'll be uncomfortable. It'll be uncomfortable? Then you ask why we lose. I can't give more money to an organization like this or to political candidates who agree with me because then I won't be able to fill in the blank. The other side defers their gratification. They'd rather see the transformation. I say this to you not to point fingers at people in this room. Obviously, in many respects, I'm speaking to the choir here. People who do care. You wouldn't be here if you didn't care. But this idea that things are just going to swing back because, that always swings back. Do you really believe that anymore? They're not going to give up. And if you look at the history of great civilizations, they have something on their side, even more corrosive to America than all of the assets I talked about that they have in their quiver. Every great civilization has been unable to stand the test of one thing: time. It's corrosive. Why is it corrosive? Because the farther away you get from the passion that made what America is, the more comfortable people get that things are just going to go along and be the way they are. The more we just sit and think, it'll change. And they win. You can make a difference. God called you here tonight. He called you to hear these men and women, and even hear me. He called you because he has a purpose for you. And I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just to pray more. Hopefully it's for everyone to pray more. Maybe it's to do something. Maybe it's to give something. Look at the examples here tonight. Plenty of examples of how you can apply this passion. Agitate whether it's in politics, whether it's protesting, whether it's in prayers, whether it's in the pro-life movement at pregnancy centers or prayers at abortion clinics. Whatever it is, do it. Do it. We can't wait. Let me assure you of a couple of things. Number one, you will meet failure after failure. You will struggle. You will fail. You might even lose your job. I looked at my career in the pro-life world. You know, we lost that battle in 96. We lost it again in 98. We lost it again in 99. Then we lost it at the Supreme Court for partial birth abortion. And I look back on that and I say, thank God we did. Thank God we lost. You know why? Because it turns out that because Bill Clinton vetoed that bill, instead of signing something which would have been very easy for him to sign, that became a major issue in American politics. It turned out to be front page story every time the bill came up, and it came up once a year because it would pass and then we'd have to override his veto. For the first time in the history of the abortion movement, the head of the abortion clinic, abortion providers organization, went on national television and said, abortion is the taking of a human life. And at that moment, it turns out, if you look at polling numbers, attitudes on abortion in America begin to change. Why? Because in a partial birth abortion, when the doctor is holding the baby who would otherwise be born alive in his or her hands, and then takes a scissor and plunges it into the back of the baby's skull, killing the baby, you can no longer lie about what abortion is. And that truth hit home with America. See, we have our plans of what we think is successful, and then God has his plans. And as we all know, his is always better. One of my favorite sayings is, God does not call on us to be successful. He calls on us to be faithful. America will not and has never been great because of our success. It's been because of our faith. That's what's made us different than any other country in the history of the world. Do you know we are the most faith-filled country in Western civilization? More people go to church than any other civilization in the West. You never hear that talked about as to what the success of America. You are living at what I believe is the most consequential time in American history since the Second World War, where America hangs in the balance. The Second World War, we look back and we look at that generation, we call them the greatest generation. Why were they great? Were they braver, stronger, more patriotic, love America more? They bent more virtue. Look, I saw America. I traveled this country running for president of the United States. I saw America. America is a good country. There are millions and millions and millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of good, decent, moral people in America. What's happened is that we've lost faith in ourselves. Ladies and gentlemen, Go back and look at the greatest generation. The war started in 1939. France fell in 1940. June of 40, Roosevelt gets on the radio, his speech where he talked about the British Empire should survive 1,000 years. This would be our finest hour. What you don't remember from that speech is he asked America to get involved, and we said no. The greatest generation said no. Why? Because we had just gone through depression. We were tired. It was tough. Economic situations. We didn't want to get involved in foreign wars. Any of this sound familiar? We were tired. We had to take care of our own families, our own situation, and our own communities. And it wasn't until a bomb dropped. And what happened? What made them great was simply this: they rose to the challenge of their time. Well, you're not going to have to put a uniform on to rise to the challenge of your time. You're going to have to live who you are fully. You're going to have to do what the other side does and take it into your schools and demand your schools teach the truth, and don't take it for granted that they are. You're going to take it into your churches and demand your pastors to preach the truth and stop worrying about their 501c3 designation. You business people are going to have to just look at the example. People like Steve Green. I know all of you here admire him. Even people on the other side of the issue admire him. How many will copy him? How many are willing to put it on the line? One of my favorite authors is a guy named G.K. Chesterton. Chesterton lived around the turn of the last century, and he was asked by a British tabloid to write an article entitled, "What's Wrong with the World?" Chesterton agreed to do it. 2 days later, he sent them the submission. And here it was what he wrote. "What's wrong with the world? I am. Respectfully submitted, G.K. Chesterton." Yes, we all are what's wrong with the world, and we all are what's right with the world. It's just how much, as Caitlin said, what are you willing to do? At this turning of the tide, at this juncture of American history, at this moment of life and a culture of life, or death and a culture of death. I know you do not want to be that grandmother or grandfather a few years down the road looking into the eyes of your grandchild and having to answer the question from them, what did you do when America was on the line? I pray that places like Southwest Indiana, where you can get 2,000 people at a banquet for life. All of the great movements, they come out of the big cities. That's baloney. All the great movements for truth come out of the churches and come out of places like Southwest Indiana. Do not let those people who try to spew The lies on these screens that we are fixated on now in America, don't let them convince you otherwise. You are the reflection of this country. And you, if you're willing to sign that document again, where you mutually pledge to each other your lives, your fortunes, and your sacred honor, we too can be part of the generation that saved America. Thank you, and God bless you.